Hello, everyone. This is the New World Geopolitics March 13th update for the Ukraine war. As usual, I'm going to go through the frontline updates. Then I think it's important to discuss some recent developments on the geopolitical front. Russian forces, after a lull in the fighting, appear to have reorganized and restarted combat operations where we are already seeing a slow, steady pace and some significant territory or positions that have been lost by the Ukrainians. On the geopolitical front, there are some leaked NATO documents that we will discuss that essentially claim that a Ukrainian victory is impossible. So let's go ahead and dive into all that. First, with the frontline updates, we're actually going to start in the Robotny area. There's really basically, we'll back up here. There's two different places where the Russians are focusing their main effort at the moment. One is in the Robotny area, trying to reduce this salient and take back these Ukrainian 2023 summer gains, and the other is in the Krasnogorovka, Avdiivka, basically west of Donetsk is the two places where the Russians are focused on. So they have you know apparently consolidated some of their forces and reorganized themselves. And we're not seeing what would be a major operation. We're just seeing the typical Russian pressure campaign in these two locations here. So going to Robotny. The Russians, after being pushed out of Robotny, have assaulted once again, pushing back in. Also, moving into some of these forested areas to the south of town, trying to regain their lost positions here. Really, Robotny, outside of being on the road that leads. Let's go ahead and show you here the road that leads to Orekiv. That is the strategic value of it. This is the Russian path into Orekiv. But as you can see, there are other roads, several other roads that lead into Orekiv. So it's not 100% necessary if the Russians decide they want to assault from these directions. This position will ultimately fall on its own anyways. I think more or less Robotny at this point is kind of just a slap in the face because it is Ukraine's main summertime achievement. So we'll keep an eye on that moving forward. Moving on to, let me see here. Sorry, I have all of my panoramic shots out of order. The Krasnogorovka area to the north, this is actually kind of an important development. The town or the small farming settlement of Nevelske has fallen into Russian hands, according to some of the more reliable mappers. This is one of the last places that Ukraine was able to shell the city of Donetsk from. Looking at the overall map view, if you can see, Donetsk down here. Let's go ahead and put a circle around that. The Ukrainians were able to shell Donetsk from locations essentially in these areas here, on the outskirts of town, and then behind Marinka as well. Now that the Russians have pushed the front line back significantly, they're finally losing those locations. There's limited capacity for the Ukrainian army to reach the center, the city center now, outside of using the HIMARS rocket launchers and things like that. Not only that, Nevelske is important for protecting the northern flank of Krasnogorovka. Of course, what we're probably going to see here is the Russians attempting to move out into this space, and get a northern flanking action on Krasnogorovka, place it into a semicircle. That way they can start attacking it on all sides and seize this final stronghold along the old 2014 Donbass front lines. You see some more evidence of that kind of progress now here in Pervomayskoye. Initially, we'd gotten information that the Russians had moved in through here into this center of the town. Let's actually get that everything off because those words are bothering me. So they'd moved into the center of town here. I was going to mention that because this was a couple days that we had this information here. it seemed to me like an exposed position, and that the Ukrainians would have a pretty good chance of capturing it back if the Russians didn't continue movement. But the Russians are starting to move up from the south. This is the most recent frontline report, actually, that we have, that the Russians are advancing on Pervomaisk from multiple different directions. So, one of two things is going to happen here. Either Ukraine is going to counterattack and stabilize this situation here and try to hold some kind of line here, or they're going to fail in that effort, and the Russians are going to continue moving, capturing this part of town here, and ultimately will be able to expand out into this area, and eventually link up with Nevelske here. One important thing to note, turning everything back on, the Russian southern movement has actually captured one of the potential supply roads going into this southern part of Pervomaisk. So that is also, important and relevant. All right, moving further to the north, in the area of Tonenke, the Russians have advanced further, taking over some, industrial farming, industrial skills farming warehouses, and things like that. A little bit of the residential sector, not much there. There's really not much else going on here on the Avdiivka front. This is mainly just to show you guys that there are still Russian assaults. For the most part, Ukraine is repelling them, but they are slowly losing ground, and the assaults are slowly beginning to tick up. All right, so this is actually oh, yes, there is one final thing to talk about. There are a number of reports of Ukrainian troops attempting to and actually managing to cross the Russian border in the Sumy region, this town here of Tetkino. There's been Ukrainian forces, pickup trucks, tanks, and stuff spotted in that area, as well as several towns in between Kharkiv and Belgorod. This is actually, the one thing I'll say about this is that I'm kind of impressed with the intelligence on this operation, because just a couple days ago, Budanov, which is the director of Ukrainian military intelligence, announced that there was a major operation coming up in the Crimea, which, obviously is pretty stupid to announce that to the public, but last year, that's essentially what happened with the counteroffensive that happened in Zaporozhye. So this looked like more of the same. The major attacks did not happen in Crimea. They might still, I'm not saying they won't, but the timing of that statement meant that the Russian focus was down here, which is pretty far away from where the Ukrainian operations actually happened. So that's the part I'm rather impressed with. Was a pretty good misdirection in their public statements. Now, other than that, there's no real strategic purpose to these things. Like, there's nowhere to go here. Ukraine stands out as, absolutely zero chance of taking a city like Belgorod at this point, or even really pressuring Belgorod or harming Russia here. This seems to be for the intent of perhaps making Putin look bad, because he has an election coming up, within the month here. Actually, probably within a couple days. So that's, I assume, the primary purpose in these Ukrainian attacks. All right, to talk about this leaked document. So in France, the French military, which is a NATO country, there's a French newspaper called Marianne magazine that obtained these leaked documents and gave us a look at what the French military knows about the war, and it's not good. But first, I kind of want to show you guys something funny. When you Google French magazine, Marianne French magazine leaked Ukraine report, you get basically 100 stories about the Eiffel Tower. And then all of a sudden you get some stories at the end. Macron panicked over a leaked report. Marianne magazine's actually behind a paywall, but I do have another article here that kind of summarizes, what happened. And in the context of this, Vladimir Putin has, kind of recently hinted that they're okay with having peace at the current front lines. And, I don't really think this is serious. I think they mention it because they know Ukraine will say no. When Ukraine is ready to make peace, I don't think Russia will make an offer right away. I think they'll try to see what else they can bite off. But with that being said, these leaked documents paint like a very, very ugly picture for for the Ukrainian army. First thing to mention is Ukrainian manpower, according to the French military assessment, is completely depleted. Zelensky needs 35,000 men a month, and they are recruiting under half of that. So that's conscripts and volunteers combined are coming, right around 15,000 men per month. And, perhaps that 35K a month gives us a hint to what Ukraine's monthly casualties are. Obviously, that's not going to tell us, the how many people are dead versus wounded, but both of those numbers are included within casualties. So, yeah, but we could perhaps maybe do that math in another video. Russia, on the other hand, is getting over 30,000 volunteers for their military every month. So that's just bonus incentives that they're offering people. Further to the eastern parts of Russia where good high paying work is harder to find. 30,000 men a month are signing up for the Russian military, and there hasn't been any conscription, additional conscription outside of the 300,000 troops that were raised, at the end of 2022. So, 2023 offensive tactically destroyed half of Kiev's 12 assault brigades. So that's kind of a big deal. We kind of already knew that, but the other takeaway from that is that the French military has basically made the assessment that Russian forces are now the new tactical and technical standard of how to run defensive operations, and this basically debunks the media myth of Russian meat assaults, or that's quoted directly from Marianne magazine. Avdiivka was an absolute rout of Ukrainian forces. Glide bombs created hell for Ukrainian troops combined with Russian assaults. This resulted in over 1,000 Ukrainian casualties a day. And then the February 17th retreat from Avdiivka was sudden and unprepared, which that's a rout. Ukraine's elite brigade, on the other hand, for Avdiivka, could not hold the line against standard Russian troops. Anywhere Russia decides to mass forces, Ukraine will face similar perils, and the assessment here is that a military victory is impossible. This is another quote from the article. For the West to continue pursuing a military solution in Ukraine would be, quote, the most serious error of analysis and judgment, the classified document said, according to Marianne. So, that's a pretty damning report. I mean, it tells us some things, a lot of things that we kind of already knew, but it basically throws out a lot of the stuff that you would typically read every day and the mainstream, right or left wing media about what's going on in Ukraine. The situation is far more dire than reported according to this leaked document. So the other thing, with that being said, and I kind of mentioned this in a live stream the other day, that, I don't think, and it seems clear that the purpose of Western support for Ukraine was never to help them win the war. It was simply, like what has actually been said publicly several times, was to try and weaken Russia through the use of the Ukrainian military, which is somewhat unethical, I guess you could say. So with that being said, the U.S. aid prospects, there is actually support right now for an aid package, and some of you guys might recently have seen the news where the Republican leader of the House has said exactly that he's willing to discuss aid for Ukraine, but the political strategy is not is not there for an aid package. So, bear with me here because this is a little bit of speculation on my part. But looking at the polling numbers, the majority of the public is okay with more aid. But the way that they do this polling is basically they ask people how they feel about Ukraine aid, and it's kind of like a yes no, like, or pick one situation where it's like, I feel like we should send more money to Ukraine, and that's a certain percent of population. I feel like we have sent the right amount of money to Ukraine, and that's a certain percent of the population. And then the final measurement is I feel we have sent too much money to Ukraine. So, or too much support, right? So you have these three different groups with the I feel, support is just right, being the largest group, and the other two groups are split basically close to along party lines. So essentially, what you're looking at here is slightly over half of the country supporting or being okay with another aid package going to Ukraine. It's to the point where this is the kind of thing that Joe Biden can actually run for re-election on. Like, if you re-elect me, I will make sure Ukraine gets more money. If an aid package is passed now, by definition of this middle group that I believe support is just right, for every dollar of additional support we send, that people that are in that group are, by definition, going to drift into the we have sent too much support and too much money group. We've spent too much group. So based on this polling, unless something dramatically changes, it looks like there's support in the American public possibly to pass just one more aid package. And if they do it before the election, then Joe Biden can't run on passing that aid package. So this is where it kind of comes in. Is this going to be a big enough issue where it can actually get Joe Biden reelected over Donald Trump, who's basically just recently said that he won't give a single dime to Ukraine? Or is the American public going to completely flip on this issue and lean towards the we've sent too much money by the time November comes around? Who knows? It's kind of tough to tell right now. All right, guys, that's it from me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and more from me next time.